What's up? Welcome in to the latest episode of Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. It's Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by our recruiting insider at Blue and Gold, Mike Singer. And Mike, Notre Dame taking a running back commitment, one that came together pretty quickly here in the form of four-star running back out of Texas, Jadarian Price, Notre Dame's seventh commitment of its 2022 class, which ranks seventh right now in Rivals early team rankings with about 10 months to go until National Signing Day. Your immediate reaction when you heard that Notre Dame was going to land him? What'd you think?
That who was going to be next because I was on vacation and we set the over under at 1.5, how many commitments there would be, and it hit the under. Mason Plummer, who appears regularly on our YouTube shows and on blueandgold.com, he originally set the over under at 2.5, and I was like, no, it's too high. I think it's going to be 1 or 2, and it ended up being 1. I don't think that's the breakdown you were looking for when you asked me that question, Patrick, but I went right to the betting odds that we had set.
No, it's relevant because I would have taken that under just because hey, it's February. What's going to happen? But I definitely would not have taken zero. And sure enough, here we are. And when Mike was on vacation in his location that will forever be a mystery to everyone on the Blue and Gold message board and the interwebs or whoever watches this and has been dying to know. Well, sorry, that's going to live on in Blue and Gold lore of where that was. But yes, I had thought for a minute like, all right, there's going to be one more, isn't there? But
Yeah,
no, the
the
recruiting guys were kind.
the betting favorite for where I was, there's a poll on the message board at blueandgold.com. The the poll that they went with, or the answer they went with, was I was sleeping on Loose Emoji's couch and my wife left me. I did take a couple work calls when I was in the undisclosed location with my wife. We are still together. So I will reveal that no, I was not in South Bend on Loose couch.
No, I mean I don't know. That seems like a 5-star hotel type of setup to
I
me.
would have hit you up, man. We would have gone out and grabbed some beers or something. So yeah.
Yeah, but instead, you we'll let the mystery of your location live on there. I don't know. For a minute, I mean, you didn't. This wasn't a choice in the poll, but I would have said you were just chilling at home, using all your vacation hours on the Ken Rockney Lounge.
Maybe, maybe. Oh wow, nice.
We'll never know. But first, before we dive into the Jadarian Price commitment a little bit more, I want to make sure you guys are subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Just takes one click. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Really love you if you do that. Helps our videos reach more people. And we don't tell you this enough, but tell your friends about us if you like what you've been watching, either if you're a first-time listener now or you've been watching or listening to us for a while. Word of mouth is a big thing. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. Follow me at Patrick Engel _. That's ENGEL. And you can follow Mike at Rivals _Singer. All right. So Notre Dame, like you said, you wondered what's next. And of course, that was about, all right, who else is going to commit while you're gone just because, that's Murphy's Law. But you kind of think the same thing with who's next when you look at running back recruiting in this class in particular, because it's been a thing that we've discussed on here and you've reported that it's likely, and from what you've gathered, that Notre Dame takes a second running back. And Price was a newer target here that this entire thing really kind of happened in a month. Picked up the offer, I believe it was right at the end of January, February 21st. He commits. And, before that offer, you're kind of looking at 3-4 other names that Notre Dame is in on and thinking, yeah, it's 2 running backs. And this is the group where Notre Dame would like to get 2 of them from. And then the Price offer comes and within a month after that, he wants to commit and they take it. But before we get too far into that, I think it's just kind of, even though we've been doing this virtual recruiting, non-in-person thing for a year, still just pretty wild every time you hear one of these stories where a kid gets an offer and a month later wants to commit. His visit here got canceled because of all the crazy weather in Texas. He couldn't come up, still wanted to commit without that visit. And it did it. And almost at this point, we feel numb to it, but it's still wild to me. But anyway, your thoughts on Notre Dame deciding to, one, offer. I don't know if we really talked about it much since the offer went out. Still a 4-star recruit who's a good get for Notre Dame, but just what this means for running back recruiting going forward.
Yeah, I probably will write this in written form at blueandgold.com. So make sure to check that out. But kind of the thought of this column is going to be this Jadarian Price commitment just kind of goes to show the power that Notre Dame still has on the recruiting front. Denison, Texas. Has anyone been there? Like that's listening, it's a small town. I think it's right near the border of Texas and Oklahoma. Um, so it's not like he's like some Catholic school kid in Chicago. Like, no, this is Denison, Texas. Small town. Notre Dame offered 3.5 weeks before his commitment. No visit. Unprecedented times. Had big time other offers, but we talk about this all the time. It's with Notre Dame, it's the combination of academics and athletics, and that's what the kids always say about Notre Dame. That's what we say. And this one just rang very true that that's what he wanted. And like the Stanford offered when he got that one, I can't remember when he landed the offer from the Cardinal, but that one was big for him. Like, whoa, look at this school. But then Notre Dame came along. It's like, wow, look at this school and the football coming off a college football playoff. So, again, this commitment to me just is like, wow, Notre Dame can offer a kid ranked inside the Rivals 250 with offers from Ohio State and a bunch of others and just win the recruitment because the kid just fell in love with Notre Dame. So that stood out to me. And we'll watch his film. He's a great player. It's a great back. We'll mainly this show we're diving into running back recruiting. Then we'll end with an interesting topic. But that was the biggest takeaway for me in this whole recruitment and how it came together was the power of Notre Dame in the name and the offer and what it means.
Yeah, I think we saw that illustrated a little bit too with Audric Estime last cycle. And yes, urban area, Catholic kid, not the same thing as Jadarian Price's hometown, but nonetheless, it's still a situation where you have a guy in the Rivals 250 who Notre Dame enters the picture for and is able to land without the kid being on campus or meeting the staff. And again, that's the new normal, but it's still a thing that's impressive. And I know a little bit to a lesser extent with Devin Alpue from last cycle too. No, not a Rivals 250 player, but still a West Coast kid who was going to stay on the West Coast, play at UCLA. Notre Dame hops in the picture late. He flips without visiting, without any of that stuff. And it's the same kind of thing you hear, like you mentioned, a lot of these guys rave about. So on Price the player, Mike, we can throw up on his film here for our YouTube audience to see. What do you like about him and what Notre Dame's getting?
Speed. I don't know what you don't like when you're watching this film. I mean, the breakaway speed maybe is a little on the smaller end. What is that? A wing T right there? You don't ever see those these days. But the shiftiness seems like he has good vision, top end speed, which I don't think Notre Dame got a burner in the 2021 class of running back. So I think you feel good there. After getting Tyree in 2020, of course. So I think he's just an all-around, the term all-purpose back. It's kind of thrown around loosely these days, but he's an all-purpose back. Someone that you would imagine Lance Taylor really likes because he does it all. And talk about this all the time with Lance Taylor and, Coach Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love and all these guys who can do multiple things as a running back. So this is someone I feel like you can split out and you can have do a lot of different things. So, I don't know the level of ball he's playing in Texas and how big it is, but the stadium looks really nice. I imagine they're playing pretty good ball in these stadiums and, just the level of competition. Again, I'm not sure about looks good enough to me. And then him, he stands out as an athlete with his speed, his agility, vision, everything. You can see why Ohio State and a bunch of other schools offered him.
And the crack staff came up with some quick research here. Denison is class 5A in Texas. That's the second biggest to
Yep.
6A. So that's legitimately
Yeah.
a very good competition. You see, what's this end zone on the film we have up right now? Prosper, I think. If that's a 5A, that's just outside the Dallas area and has produced a number of
Sure.
FBS guys. So yeah, it's not like he's playing, 2A football in West Texas or seven
Right.
man or whatever. So yeah, I don't think you
What
worry about
I'm
the
curious
competition
what the
here.
crack staff has to say in how big Denison, Texas is. Um, I'm sure that's probably a quick Google search as I'm continuing to talk as our crack staff is able to look that up. But man,
Yes,
God,
it
Jadarian
is.
Price film is a lot of fun to watch. Kick returning
Yes,
as well.
the crack staff has done the research and has found that Denison, Texas, had a population of 22,682. You were right; it is smack in the region that you call Texoma. I have actually driven through it, and yeah, that's Denison.
Yeah, I plan to go to Dallas in just a couple weeks, and we'll certainly see JD Price. So looking forward to that. But yeah, solid get for Notre Dame. Um, I want to dive into what's next for running back recruiting here because I don't think it's over. But before we do that, was there any other topics that we had on our outline here, Patrick, for JD Price?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this now marks three straight cycles with a rivals 250 running back for Notre Dame. I think that falls in line with about what you want and can reasonably expect. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah.
And who knows? It could be two. Let's touch on that.
Let's get into
Who's
it.
who are you eyeing here, or names that people should know as far as who might be a realistic target and the guys Notre Dame would want to join Price in this class?
So the interesting thing, Patrick, is, and you touched on this earlier, is there were the names that we have had in there for a long time. Gavin Sawchuk, Notre Dame offered like a year ago, running back from Colorado. Nicholas Singleton was Notre Dame's very first running back offer in the 2022 cycle. That was November 2019. Dallin Hayden from Memphis, Tennessee, target for probably close to a year now. And then you have, Damari Alston from Atlanta. Notre Dame's been after him for, I want to say, since last summer. Jabran Payne from Cincinnati. So you have some of these names like, all right, Notre Dame's you got like a really good group of 5 or 6. And then they go out and offer like a Zach Evans from Texas, a Jadarian Price from Texas, Jordan Bryant James from Tennessee. So they're offering some new guys here in just the past few weeks. And then, someone like JD Price says, okay, I want to commit. Like, I've done your virtual stuff. I've done my research on Notre Dame. I want to commit. Well, then if you're Notre Dame, you're still very much in the mix for Nicholas Singleton and Dallin Hayden. And I could have seen a scenario where the Irish got both of them. At the end of the day, I think they would have probably split split with Ohio State, because Ohio State's in the mix for both Hayden and Singleton as well. I think that still might happen where, hey, Singleton goes to Notre Dame, then Hayden picks OSU, or vice versa. But I mean, Notre Dame could have got both, or maybe Notre Dame pull off the upset and get Sawchuk and Singleton, or any combination, 2 of the 3, or maybe a Jabran Payne, because Payne is very close with Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. Freeman was recruiting him hard when he was at Cincinnati. Damari Alston, good friend of Kari G, Notre Dame safety signing in the 2021 class, and Alston's been to Notre Dame before. So you had some of these guys that you had been on for a longer period of time that you're still very much in the mix for, and where they all stacked up on the board. I'm not going to get into that, but I can say that Sawchuk, Singleton, and Hayden have been the big 3 for Notre Dame, it seems like, for quite some time. So I go back to, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Like, do you pass up? Would you turn away someone like JD Price? And for our YouTube audience, we were just watching his film. Do you pass that player up for the hope of, getting players that, you might or have higher on the board or built stronger relationships for a kid like JD Price, who you are really just getting to know and maybe aren't as familiar with. So that was another fascinating thing to me, Patrick, is, they're going to take 2 in this class. That was that. They kind of solidified that. The staff did, based on what I was told, is that they were definitely going to take 2 instead of just 1. I don't think the numbers called for 1, Patrick, but look, Kyron Williams, if he has a great season in 2021, he's probably gone to the NFL. If Audric Estime and or Logan Diggs come in and are ballers, and then you have Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree, what does that leave Sibo Flemister? So, I mean, I feel like if you look at the roster right now with the running back depth chart, probably one of those guys is going to be gone after this season. So it does make sense to take 2. So those are kind of my rambles there, Patrick.
That makes sense, especially when you look at, let's say, the 2022 depth chart has no Kyron Williams, a 5th-year senior in Sibo Flemister, or if that, well, who knows? Maybe he takes a grad transfer. I don't know. But that's an option. The best case you have there is 5th-year senior Sibo Flemister, who's not back in all likelihood. I know they have the option with the COVID year and everything, but I try not to assume that that's a thing that happens with anybody until they actually say it, especially with a guy who would be in his 6th year. And then junior year, Chris Tyree, obviously, the recruiting pedigree there and what he did show on the field and his limited but still notable carries as a freshman in 2020. Yeah, you could be looking at a spot where those 2 guys are your most veteran in Sibo and Tyree, and both of them are gone after 2022, or who knows. So then, yeah, you have Estime and Diggs as rising juniors. There would be sophomores in 2020. In 22. So yes, I think it makes sense to take 2 guys there. And what I'd love to know, and I'm sure we'll never figure it out, but you still kind of, you get curious anyway, is when Notre Dame offered Price in late January, I think it was, I wonder how much it expected that it might happen and accelerate as quickly as it did in this case. And not that you assume that you're going to get both of, say, Singleton and Dallin Hayden, or even 2 of the 3 of the big 3 that you mentioned, but at least it's something that, hey, it's a thing they'd like to keep open as long as possible. But then again, we're talking about a good problem to have here, where, hey, they're going to throw an offer out there for a kid who's still a Rivals 250 player, pursued by teams that you want Notre Dame to be competing with for recruits. And if he commits, then, all right, that you can't really spin that into a negative is what I'm saying, especially because, no, you can't assume that you're going to get 2 or of those bigger 3 guys, or even 1, who knows. Yeah, you take it if it's there. Absolutely the right call. And because he's someone who can help Notre Dame, it's that simple.
Yeah, let's look at the offer list. JD Price, 19 in total per Rivals. Arizona State, Auburn, Baylor, Houston, Minnesota, Missouri. Not blowing anyone's socks off. If you're a Notre Dame fan, knowing Notre Dame fans, I should say. Ohio State, there's a big one. Oklahoma State, SMU. Shout out to the Ponies, always. Stanford, big one. TCU, a Texas offer. I would assume that was under the old staff, Texas Tech. Tulsa, UCLA, or excuse me, USC, it's a big one. UTSA, Utah, Virginia Tech. It's a solid offer list in total, especially when you look at Ohio State, Stanford, Texas, and USC there. You mentioned a little bit of something that I did last week, the speculation of the good problems to have and all this stuff. I just want to reiterate, Notre Dame caught so much heat from the fan base last year with the Will Shipley recruitment that they went all in on that one guy. And a big part of their pitch was, hey, Clemson, they already have a running back committed. Phil Maffa from Atlanta. All these other schools, they're taking 2 backs. You're the only guy we want to take in this class. You're our very top of the board guy. At the end of the day, it didn't matter for Will Shipley. He still went to Clemson. So I think the trend we're going to continue to see is all right, we feel good about these 5 guys, but you just don't know. Recruiting is always uncertain, folks, and it's even more uncertain in this crazy COVID time. So offer more guys, and if you have a good problem to have and you have to say, hey, we don't have a spot for you, that's not the worst thing in the world for these kids. If this kid is, calling up Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's having to say no, I'm sure that kid's good enough to go find another Power 5 home, so he's going to be okay. So that's kind of my thoughts there. But the question on the screen for our YouTube audience says, what's next 2022 running back recruiting? And the big 3 that we talked about, and even Damari Alston, Jadarian Payne, still very much in the mix. I mentioned Jordan James, Zach Evans. I'm sure there's a guy or 2 out there that I'm forgetting as well. But the one I really want to talk about is Dallan Hayden. Big mover, 70 spots up in the Rivals ranking updates this week. And if you made me guess right now who is going to join Jadarian Price in the 2022 class at running back, one, I would say it's going to be one of those top guys. I don't think they're going to take someone who to pair with Price right now if they still could get a Dallan Hayden or Nicholas Singleton. So I think right now it might be Hayden, a Tennessee legacy. His dad, Aaron, was a running back for the Vols. And this recruitment really seems to be Notre Dame and Ohio State. And then for Nicholas Singleton, I mentioned, also seems like Notre Dame, Ohio State, but then Penn State's in there as well. But I'm liking Notre Dame in this recruitment right now, Patrick. That first run, you saw the shiftiness and the make you miss in a phone booth. And then here, you just see so much with Dallan Hayden too that goes right along with all the backs, the versatile all-purpose guys that Lance Taylor likes at the running back position. So if you pair Jadarian Price with Dallan Hayden, and then last cycle you had Logan Diggs, who people are already saying, man, that might be kicking ourselves about a 3-star ranking. That's what Mike Farrell said, comparing him to Travis Etienne. And then you had Audric Estime, and then you look at 2020, Chris Tyree, 2019 class, Kyron Williams, and some damn good recruiting classes at running back.
And no question. And I think this is not at all to dispute what you said about Notre Dame and Ohio State being the 2 to watch here, but just a random note that I think he said his top 4, or put out a new top 4 with Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, unsurprisingly, given his dad playing there, and then Illinois, which is an interesting thing. And I say this just for random facts and tidbits, but his brother Chase is a grad transfer to Illinois. They won't overlap in college, but Chase was originally recruited by Brett Bielema at Arkansas and played for Bielema there for, I believe it was 2 years. And just kind of something where Illinois has that going for it, and why it was able to offer in mid-January, and I think make that top list. But just a random interesting notes here.
Yeah.
Notre Dame and Ohio State been in pursuit of him for a while here. So
yeah, it was Oregon in that spot, and yeah, it seems Illinois is past them up. But yeah, from people I talked to, it seems like Notre Dame's in the mix. We had an article at him while I was on vacation at blueandgold.com. Mason Plummer wrote breaking down Hayden's recent calls with the Notre Dame staff. So yeah, if you're talking about Jadarian Price and Dallan Hayden, man, that is a heck. You stack that up with pretty much anyone in the country. So Patrick, as I was coming up with the notes or outline for this this show this week, I'm thinking about running back recruiting, and I'm like, man, like this pair would be really, really good. Or if it's Singleton, Alston, any of these other guys, like, man, that would be impressive. Then I'm just like thinking about D-line recruiting, corner recruiting, linebacker recruiting, every position. I'm like, man, the upside here is so big. And it's just like kind of making me think, I don't really like doing this, but is this the year that Notre Dame gets a top 5 class? We always like to talk about this podcast intro has Kelly's quote, which he has later explained, and we're not going to get all into the whole top 5 discussion, but in terms of how Kelly feels about it. But in terms of how Rivals sees the top 5 class, this might be the perfect storm, Patrick.
So you can look at that in a couple of ways. One, just as far as this is a math problem where the formula is simple, where all right, Rivals takes your top 20 players and then it puts it in its formula and gets the points in the top 5 points and or whatever, top 5 classes and so on. So will this one get to 20 guys? I think that seems a little less clear. I don't know what you've, I remember off the top of my head at least, what you've said and reported on that, Mike. But with the extra year of eligibility, with some guys possibly coming back for that, but guys who do use that for 2022, they will count toward the 85. Unlike, which is the case in 2021, where Kurt Heinisch and Jonathan Dorr, to use Notre Dame examples, are coming back but do not count toward that 85-man scholarship. That's one kind of wrinkle. And then, of course, if you want to get into the top 5, someone else has to leave. And that means, all right, we have to bump out one of Alabama or Ohio State or LSU or Georgia or Clemson or Oklahoma, like those teams that seemingly some combination of them make up the top 5 in most recent cycles. So that's a big ask. But in any year, but especially if it's a situation where you only sign 18 guys and then you're relying on having a really high average star ranking and a bunch of Rivals 250 bonus points and all kinds of this other stuff that gives you bonuses in the formula. But yeah, when you look at it that way, it's a tough ask. But the good news of it is it's set up where if you kind of mock out the class and just say, all right, 20 guys, and fill it out position by position with an optimistic look, but one that's still based in reality, It looks really good, just as you kind of touched on there. And I think a lot of that is you just looking at in a lot of these instances where they've loaded up and just fired some deep shots, like Steph Curry threes in your face that they're taking and hoping to connect on a few with, say, Zach Rice, the 5-star offensive lineman. All these linebacker offers you've seen Marcus Freeman send out. The 2 running backs there, where it's Notre Dame versus Ohio State. Jair Brown, the 4-star corner, who's committed to Ohio State that they're recruiting. And that's just to name a few of those. And obviously you're not going to get every single one of them. But when you line up a mock class with, say, a bunch of Rivals 250 targets or something, it's not crazy to look at that and say, yeah, a lot of these guys are within the realm of possibility for Notre Dame to land. And the easiest way to bump some of those teams out of the top 5 and then, of course, beat them on the field is get some of the kids they want in recruiting.
Yeah. In terms of the class number, Notre Dame's at 7 right now. Always fluid. I think the range is probably 18 to 22. I also said that same range for the 2021 cycle. And as I had up on the screen just a minute ago for a YouTube audience, ended up signing 27, which was tied for biggest in the top 10 Rivals with Alabama. So it gets to a point where, Rivals only accounts for your top 20 players in their class. So, Notre Dame's past that 20 mark. So it's now when you're just bringing in, 3-star guys there at late in the cycle, it's not really going to change your ranking there. Notre Dame had a solid, respectable finish at number 10. Michigan passed them up late, but I do think that there's a solid chance they get right around 5 or 6. I think 5 to 7 maybe could actually be somewhat realistic. The perfect storm for this to happen for Notre Dame. Here's what it is, Irish fans. You've got to get at least 22 or 23. I mean, Notre Dame's taken a kicker and a long snapper in the past couple classes. That doesn't help if they're in your top 20 ranked guys. So when Notre Dame took 17 guys in 2020, all of those guys counted, plus you were missing 18, 19, 20. So 3 guys that you just could have had helping your class ranking. So you got to get at least like 22 to take out like a 2-star kicker. I don't think Notre Dame's going to take any specialists on scholarship, but just, maybe it's some 5.53 star Notre Dame's taking a flyer on somebody. So you have to get to at least 22, is my opinion. And then your top targets have to line up with guys that Rivals feels like is really good. So if you're taking a flyer on, a long defensive end, Aaronsberger, Devin Alpue, that kind of guy, that's going to happen. But then someone like Aiden Gobira, right? Like Aaronsberg, Alpue, we don't expect to be highly ranked. But like Aiden Gobira, Notre Dame loves and really values him and sees him as a big-time prospect. Well, Rivals only sees him as a 5.73 star. So that's not going to help. Does he get bumped up? He didn't have a junior fall season. He's now playing a season in the spring, so he's something to keep an eye on. But that's just an example here. So if Notre Dame gets like a Gavin Wimsatt as their quarterback, he's the number 60 overall player in the country. That would really help. If they get Steve Angeli, he's a 4-star ranked outside of the Rivals 250. So if you're inside the 250, you get bonus points depending on exactly where you rank. I think Notre Dame sees those guys fairly equally. Rivals has a bigger gap, so you kind of have to get lucky in that your top players are also Rivals' top players. So there's kind of laying the groundwork. But as I'm starting to go through each position, and I'm glad you said these two words, Patrick, mock class, because we're going to be doing this at blueandgold.com on Monday in my gold standard. I'm really looking forward to writing up that one, and I will calculate the points. If this is their rankings today and they signed, how many points would Notre Dame have, and how would that stack up to last year's class? Like if you put this class into 2021, how would it stack up? So I'll have that at blueandgold.com. But as I'm thinking, quarterback could be very highly ranked if they get Gavin Wimsatt. Even Steve Angeli is a 4-star guy. That will very much help. Two top 200 running backs. The receivers, they're in the mix for some Rivals 100 guys. Tight ends, if you go get a 4-star in Holden Stays, you already have a high 3-star in Jack Nickel. The offensive line already has a pair of Rivals 250 guys. If you go out and get a Zach Rice, that would be monstrous. Notre Dame's really only in the mix for 4-star offensive linemen at this point. The defensive line and just the rest of the defense, Marcus Freeman is just going berserk. And there's like 15 guys I can point to and be like, all right, Notre Dame's in the top 2 or 3 in this recruitment. And they're fairly highly ranked. So I'm not trying to get anyone's expectations high to set you up for failure. All I'm saying is that Notre Dame really has a shot here to go get like a highly ranked class, and just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and obviously that's what you listeners want to hear, and even let's say it just finishes 7th, which is where it's ranked right now. I think you judge it just based on how many times we're able to connect on a couple of those deep shots where you get Michael Mayer and Chris Tyree and Jordan Johnson in the same class, or to use a couple of old example, Blake Fisher and Lorenzo Styles and one other type of guy in that ranking area in the same class, or a 2019 class, but you had 1 or 2 more Kyle Hamiltons. And that's easier to do when you take the big shots more frequently. And look, I hate to belabor the point here, but I think it's just been proven ever since it happened. But you want more situations and home run swings like a Will Shipley, especially considering, look at how you can recover and what we talked about. Look at the Notre Dame's power in a recruitment in this weird recruiting environment to go pull in a well-regarded, highly ranked kid who belongs there later in the cycle, or within a recruitment that lasts an entire month like it did with Price. So, yeah, I mean, you don't get those kinds of guys without taking, those big, I don't even want to call it a gamble, but swinging for the fences. And yeah, I think you look at this cycle and you see a lot of those situations where they've done that. And like you said, Mike, from what you've gathered in doing reporting on these commitments, that some of those have a decent chance of connecting. And that's what you want to see here, because I don't think you're in Notre Dame, you're going to be in a spot where regularly in the top 5, whatever is going to happen. Just if for no other reason, then you got to bump one of those teams out more often than not. And I'm not really sure that you can think Ohio State or Alabama or LSU or someone like that is going to leave that spot anytime soon.
Couple more things before we get out of here that I want to mention. The one time Notre Dame did have a top 5 class under Brian Kelly was 2013. Patrick, for the most part, that class didn't hit. So, and when those guys were, what would that been, seniors or fifth year guys? That was 2016 when the team was terrible. So, just one thing to point out. And the other thing is, it will also help Notre Dame if they have a 3rd straight year where they have a guy bumped from 4 to 5-star status. In 2020, it was Jordan Johnson was a high 4. Rivals bumped him to a 5-star. In 2021 is Blake Fisher, who is a high 4, bumped to a 5. If that happens again in 2022, that would give him a good push as well. Who that might be, I don't know if that player's committed right now. Might be Tyson Ford if he shows out this spring and summer or into a senior season.
Yeah, I would bet if it happens, it's someone who is not currently in the class. And granted that, all right, it's 7 players. Let's say the class ends up at 21. There's still 2/3 of the spots empty. I'll take the math and the odds on that.
Sure.
But all right, Mike, you good?
I'm good. Good pod, dude.
We've exhausted everything we've had to touch on here in running back recruiting, but still one of the more interesting positions in this cycle to follow here. But we will talk to you next week. And until then, make sure you don't miss Mike's Gold Standard with that mock class. That's coming out Monday morning. And actually, you kind of hinted on a story I'm going to have tomorrow morning, Mike, on that 2013 class. It was really highly ranked. I went and actually looked back at all the classes to see how they'd done as far as hitting on 3 stars, kind of prompted by, hey, the last 4 years and the 4-year anniversary of the 2017 class, which I think, and it kind of confirmed when I went back and did this research, found like, hey, that's the class where like it's really the example of hitting on guys and development and overachieving and all those other words when you think of just getting the absolute most out of 3-star guys who turn into impact players. But we will talk to you again next week. Until then, take care.